I'm Jim Inkster, your moderator, and this is the 32nd show for Governor John Bel Edwards, who started this in April of 2016, shortly after he took office. And we have had an election since our last show, and we'll talk about that when we get started here in a moment. But a reminder that you can join the conversation by giving us a call. I see two lines open. 877-217-5757 is your number for Ask the Governor. And we had an election 2 weeks ago today. Certainly big news nationally, maybe not as big news in Louisiana, but Governor, a lot more people voted this time than even in the governor's race 3 years ago. It's nice to have more participation from the electorate.
It is. I think that's a great thing. And, the truth is it's always been very important to vote. And hopefully people take the time out to be an informed voter, so that whatever their position on the issues is, and that they get familiar with the candidates and the ballot propositions and so forth. But the other thing, Jim, it's never been easier to vote than it is now, with all of the early voting days and then the option, obviously, to vote on Election Day. And so it's never been easier, and it's good to see that more people did go out and vote. And that's, I think, a positive development going forward. And it looked like that wasn't just the trend here in Louisiana, but that was the trend in many places across the country.
And December 8th, we have another election. Hopefully the turnout will be higher than it was for the treasurer's race last year. But we have an election for a statewide office.
We do. So we've got the Secretary of State's race to finish up. That's in a runoff. We also have some various races across the state of Louisiana, some municipal elections, so forth, like, for example, up in Shreveport. With so many races having been concluded, however, 2 weeks ago, I guess you would think that there wouldn't be as much interest or as high a turnout, but hopefully that won't prove to be the case, and we'll have a really high turnout and a lot of voter participation, so that we can conclude the runoff in good fashion as well.
Now, when you vote, do you go back home?
I typically vote by mail now. The registrar in Tangipahoa Parish sends me the ballot here, so I still do vote in Tangipahoa Parish, but it is typically by mail. Although I think on a couple of occasions I've had the ability to go back on Election Day or early and vote, and certainly next year I intend to go personally to Tangipahoa Parish and vote probably early.
I remember John Breaux once saying he never voted other than at the ballot box because he didn't want anybody to see how he was voting.
Well, that is true. You mail it in, and somebody's got to open that envelope and check it against your name, and they know how you voted. But we have professionals in our registrar's offices.
There you go.
And so I don't worry about that.
Okay. Now, there was a dispute. The Secretary of State, who's in a runoff, Kyle Ardoin, got in a row with a registered voter who had served some time.
Oh, yeah.
And was able to vote after fulfilling the probation obligations. And you thought it was, I'm gathering, inappropriate to take aim at this gentleman.
Well, he didn't just take aim at the gentleman. It was a gratuitous and erroneous shot at me in the Department of Corrections and wanting to know whether we had simply made a mistake or whether we had given preferential treatment to someone by allowing him to vote. And the answer was neither. And contrary to your introduction of this topic, he didn't serve time. He was sentenced with the benefit of Article 893, which means the sentence was deferred. Because the sentence was deferred, and this was something the judge chose to do, there was never a sentence of imprisonment. And so he never lost the right to vote. So there was nothing to communicate to the Secretary of State's office or anywhere else. And so for him to just come out, and rather than inquiring quietly if he had a issue, for him to publicly suggest that either we had made a mistake or that we had, engaged in preferential treatment, it was just unfortunate. And had he simply looked at the law books, and he's the chief elections officer, he should have known it. But if he didn't know it, he ought to check the books before he publicly writes me a letter like he did. And that's unfortunate, but I think we've cleared it up now, and everybody understands that Kyle was mistaken.
And there are people who've served time, such as our former governor, that he votes. He's
Yes.
fulfilled his probationary requirements.
Yeah, and we passed a law in the legislature last year, Representative Pat Smith, that will restore the voting rights to more felons or earlier going forward. And it's a way to reintegrate people into society, give them a vested interest in what's going on. And the studies have shown, and by the way, we were an outlier in the country with how long people were having to wait to have their rights restored, if they were ever restored at all. But reintegrating them back into society, giving them vested interest in what happens, is one of the ways to lower recidivism rates as well. And so I was happy to sign that bill into law. But it didn't. It just was not an issue. And unfortunately, I believe Kyle saw an opening to score some political points, and he was just wrong.
Okay. Nationally, there were a lot of elections that drew immense attention, and of course, there is a turnover in the U.S. House of Representatives. Does that affect Louisiana in any way?
Well, it doesn't really affect us directly, as you know, because we didn't have any turnover in our congressional seats here in Louisiana. And really, the election turned out about like the experts, the political pundits had predicted. I think the range of turnover in governorships was supposed to be between 4 and 8. It turned out to be 7 net Democrat pickups. And the House, I'd heard, was anywhere from 25 to 40, and I think it ended up being
It's 37 right now.
37 now, with a couple of races still open. So that was within the predicted range. And then in the Senate, I think the Republicans are +2 and could end up +3 after Mississippi.
It's 52-47 now, and
But that's,
it was 51-49, so that it'd be either +1 or +2.
yeah. So I mean, it was no big surprises, and I think it was fairly typical election for the first midterm of a president's first term. And I guess I was just hopeful that somehow, after this midterm election, the political rhetoric would become a little more civil. There doesn't seem to be much evidence to support that.
This one's about minimum wage, and Arkansas, which is a state like Louisiana, rural and poor, and in Arkansas, the people of that state voted to raise the minimum wage to $11 an hour.
Yeah, and Jim, interestingly, several years ago, they increased the minimum wage to $8.50. With the support of Walmart, which is headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I was actually speaking with the CEO of Walmart a while back, and he tells me they don't pay any of their employees less than $8.50. We're at $7.25, the federal minimum wage that Congress last changed in 2009. It is now the end of 2018, and I will just tell you that's just not a meaningful living wage in 2018. And I ran in 2015, as you know, and one of the things that I was advocating then is that we increase the minimum wage in Louisiana. I would like to do that in 2 steps to $8.50 an hour from the current $7.25. And we've introduced that legislation each of my first 3 years. We're going to do it again in the 4th year, and we're going to continue until we're successful. And by the way, the overwhelming majorities of people in Louisiana support it. Missouri went to $12 an hour in this most recent election over time with multiple steps. So it's just something that we need to do in Louisiana, I believe, as well, so that work actually pays off for people and they can actually support themselves. And we have too many children trapped in poverty in Louisiana because we don't pay their parents a reasonable wage.
Well, there's an intense lobby led by the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry that likes things the way they are.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I just think they're wrong, and I believe that the majority of the people in Louisiana support an increase in the minimum wage, something that is modest but meaningful, and I think the $8.50 is the right number. And I would really like to work with Lobby, the Federation of Independent Businesses, all the other business groups to get them to support what I think is a reasonable increase in the minimum wage.
Lisa in Baton Rouge. Good afternoon, Lisa. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi there. Happy Thanksgiving to you both, first of all.
Thank you, Lisa, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. My husband and I have a large family, and in August of 16, we flooded. We had 6 foot of water. We did have insurance. because we had insurance, we were denied for the Restore Louisiana fund. My question is, as much as the insurance money helped, it has far from made us whole or even halfway to being whole again. Is there any discussion, because there's so much money sitting there that people aren't applying for, that has already been given out, is there any discussion in expanding who is eligible to receive those funds? Because
Lisa, thank you very much for the call. I am almost certain there is not a possibility to help you, but I want you to stay on the line, give your information to Micah, and I will have someone call you to follow up. When the Federal Register notice came out from HUD on the Community Development Block Grant funding, and that's what we're talking about with respect to Restore Louisiana, homeowners who had insurance were ineligible. And so I think that is the answer to this issue, and we don't have the discretion to waive that. But I'll have somebody call you. I will tell you that what we are working on very hard is to get the president to sign a waiver that we requested on October the 5th pursuant to brand new federal legislation that actually had been signed into law that day, asking him to waive the duplication of benefits problem that was preventing so many homeowners from participating in Restore because they had qualified for and potentially accepted some part of their Small Business Administration loan that they were told to get by FEMA when they applied for initial assistance. So we are working very hard right now to get that waiver so that we can bring those individuals into the Restore program, and we hope to have a positive result from that, because the legislation indicated the president should grant or deny the waiver within 45 days. We're obviously anticipating he will grant the waiver. The 45 days is about now, so any day now we hope to bring them into the program, and that's a good number of additional homeowners that would benefit from that. But I will get, if you'll give your information to Micah, Elisa, we will get somebody to call you and talk to you specifically about your situation.
Thank you, Lisa. Scott in Youngsville. Hi, Scott. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hello, Governor. Good afternoon. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Hi, Scott. Thank you very much. Same to you.
I'm not sure if you're familiar, but recently West Feliciana Parish has passed several restrictions concerning the rights of bicyclists and their rights to the road. And in a lot of cases, it's contrary to the state of Louisiana's laws as they pertain to bicyclists and their rights to the road. I guess I have a two-pronged question. My first question is, does state law supersede parish law when it comes to our rights to the road? And second, just personally, what is your position concerning cycling in Louisiana?
Okay. The first one is pretty easy. I support cycling. First of all, because we have the best food in the world, and we love to eat it. We have more than our fair share of obesity and obesity-related illnesses like hypertension and diabetes. The other thing is, when I was state representative, every time that I could, and I represented Tangipahoa, St. Helena, East, and West Feliciana at the time, we got improvements done with shoulders to our highways wide enough to accommodate cyclists safely, and then we had DOTD and others designate those as bike-friendly routes, and so that we would encourage cycling. By the way, as you probably know, Scott, because it sounds like you're a cyclist, there's some economic development opportunities around that, because there's a big economic impact when groups of people go together to cycle across rural Louisiana, and it brings people to parts of Louisiana that otherwise they would never go to. Clearly, state law trumps local law. It depends specifically on what it says. Most of the time, the state statute will say notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, and that sort of thing. The question I would have, and I can't answer this based on what you said, is whether the particular roadway you mentioned is a state roadway or a local roadway, because it would be, I would imagine that West Feliciana could pass a law regulating cycling on local roads, but not on state roads. And But quite frankly, I have not looked into this to the level of detail that I would need to give a categorical answer. So I'm going to have to do that. But I happen to believe in there have been some really tragic accidents in West Feliciana Parish. One of them most recently involved the death of a Baton Rouge
Buddy Amoroso.
counselor. Exactly. And so I don't want you to think that they don't have some reason to try to promote safety and that sort of thing. But it is something that I will take a look at, Scott. And I thank you for the call.
Thank you, Scott. 877-217-5757 is your number for Ask the Governor. There is one line open. Mark in Greenville Springs. Hi, Mark. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor. It's a
Hi,
pleasure
Mark.
to speak to you. The earlier caller touched on what I was going to ask, and that was if you had an update on the duplicate of benefits in regards to Restore Louisiana. And I guess I have another part of that question is, if you've gone through the process, which I have, and was deemed you could get this much money, but you've been denied because of the SBA loan, would we then, if it did go through and everything's fine, would we have to reapply, or do they go back and look at that file again?
Well, you only have to apply one time. What we needed to do once Congress started seriously entertaining legislation to allow us to get around the duplication of benefits prohibition is we had to reopen the survey and the application period, which we actually did, and so as a result of the change that happened on October the 5th, as you know, I asked the president that day, the same day he signed the bill into law, for the waiver, so that the duplication of benefits problem would not exist for those who had been approved for a Small Business Administration loan. We then reopened the period to submit the survey and to apply, and the survey was extended until Friday, October the 19th. The application deadline was extended until November the 16th. We had over 2,000 homeowners that we invited to apply. Of that, 1,450 actually did. But before that ever happened, we had a number of homeowners, and it sounded like you were one of them, Mark, that had already gone through this process, and so your files were already there. Now, if we get the waiver from the president, and I hope we will, and I hope we'll have it soon as HUD issues the guidance on how we are to implement the change in the law, we will then be in a position to pull your file up, like all the others that were submitted in similar fashion, and make the adjustments without you having to do a new survey or a new application. But we did have to have those who had never completed the survey and never applied to actually go through that, and we now have gone through that process as well. So cross your fingers. I'm hoping the president's going to sign this. We're working with Garrett Graves and Cedric Richmond, two members of the Congress who represent portions of the Baton Rouge area and other areas around the state of Louisiana as well, to try to get this done as soon as possible. And then once the president signs it, to try to get HUD to issue their guidance so that we can move forward just as quickly as possible. But Mark, if you're still there, if you give your name to Micah, I will make sure that someone from my office who's affiliated with the Restore program will call you, and they can get your precise Restore number and go and take a look at it and give you a much more detailed answer than I was able to do over the radio.
Claudette in Lafayette. Claudette, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call,
Thank you,
Governor
Claudette.
Edwards. My question is, if you can talk a little bit about the future of Medicaid in Louisiana for specifically regarding mental health services for children under the age of 18.
Wow. Well, Claudette, first of all, thank you for the call, and I wish you and your family a very happy Thanksgiving. So Medicaid for children is not one of the areas that has most recently changed as a result of Medicaid expansion, because I think, as you know, the expansion population that deals with adults. And with respect to children and Medicaid, and especially as it relates to mental health, we actually had incorporated behavioral health benefits into Medicaid for that particular population back in December of 2015. And that is the managed care organizations, the MCOs. There are 5 of them who administer the Medicaid program in Louisiana. Basically 5 insurance companies when we got away from having the state doing that directly as a fee for service. And so that's done by the 5 MCOs. And so if you've got an individual out there who is on Medicaid and needs mental health services, then you would work that through the managed care organization that the individual is enrolled in. And so beyond that, I don't know how to answer your question other than to tell you that if you'll give your information to Micah, I will have someone from the Department of Health, from the Medicaid division, call you and try to answer that question with more detail and as it relates to your specific circumstances.
I think you had a follow-up to a question posed earlier by Lisa in Sherwood, Governor.
Yes, so Lisa was the first caller from Baton Rouge, and she asked a question about participation in the Restore program if you had flood insurance that covered the home. I gave an answer that was probably correct, but incomplete. And I can tell you, Lisa, we've got individuals from the Restore program trying to call you now. If you have flood insurance, that is considered a duplication of benefits. It is not subject to waiver under federal law or under the new federal law. And so at the end of the day, if the damage exceeded the insurance, then the homeowner may be eligible for the Restore program for the difference through the grant program that we're administering in Restore. If the damage to your home is less than the insurance that was available, then you're ineligible because of the duplication of benefits provision. So, Lisa, I hope that cleared it up for you and for others, and do answer the phone because I understand that we've got someone from Restore program trying to call Lisa right now.
Jennifer in New Orleans. Hello, Jennifer. You're on Ask the Governor. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Jennifer, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Thank you very much. So what I had brought up was that there has been, my family member has had cancer and has had reconstruction surgery, and is in the process of the remainder of that. And during this time, we approached several hospitals for our treatment. And when we approached Ochsner, they were sending all of the Medicaid patients further away into rural areas for treatment, which was difficult for us to reach because, my sister's on disability. We're not making enough money to travel to go do that. And they're telling us that they are accepting new patients, but you have to drive way far away to go do it. They won't do the surgeries in the city for people on Medicaid or Medicare and things like that. I've also had this from the doctors that are treating my sister. We ended up going through a different hospital at his suggestion so we could get our treatments in the area. And I'm concerned about this.
All right.
Well, Jennifer, based on what you just told me, I too am concerned, and I'm hopeful that there's been some sort of a miscommunication. Assuming there hasn't been, I too need you to give Micah, I'm working Micah out today, your name and number so that I can have someone from the Department of Health call you. Because there's only one standard of care, and whether you're on Medicaid, Medicare, whether you have private insurance, there's only one standard of care. And I've got a good long-term working relationship with our partner hospitals, whether it's Children's, whether it's the FMOL, Our Lady of the Lake here in Baton Rouge, or Ochsner. But I would be very concerned about this, especially because transportation is not readily available to many people who are on Medicaid or Medicare because of finances, because of age, because of physical condition, those sorts of things. And so I do want to get to the bottom of this because as best I can tell, not only it just shouldn't be happening, and I'm quite certain that if that is happening, that would violate some rules and regulations under which the hospital is required to operate. So, Jennifer, please give your information to Micah, and then we'll get back with you.
Brenda in Denham Springs. Thank you, Jennifer. Brenda, you're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor Edwards.
Hi, Brenda.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
And my issue is also with Restore, but with a little bit different twist. I don't feel like I've been treated fairly because I did sell my home, but my husband and I lived in it for 40-plus years, raised our children there, and my children thought that I was not physically and emotionally able to handle the reconstruction of it. But it doesn't lessen the hurt that I suffered and the financial difficulties that I suffered from it. My home was valued at almost $300,000, and I got a whole lot less for it than that, plus lost a lot of my furniture and, mementos, etc. But I don't know if there's any help for me, but I did want to just ask you about that.
Well, Brenda, I am unaware of any help through the Restore program for homeowners who sold their home, and I'm assuming you sold your home in a damaged condition, which is why it brought in less than it had previously been valued at, and I think you indicated it was a $300,000 value at one time. I am not aware of any part of the Restore program that would benefit you. However, I want to make sure that you get a call too from someone working in the Restore program. For example, we're not just giving grants to repair homes. We are also giving grants in order to reimburse homeowners in certain conditions who actually maybe they cashed in their retirement or spent their savings and so forth in order to fix their homes up after the flood. They may be entitled to some reimbursement, and maybe you spent some money, for example, to fix your home up before you sold it that you could get reimbursed for. So I do want to make sure that we have someone from the Restore program call you as well to answer your specific questions. But hopefully you did apply. I'm not sure whether you did take the survey and apply for the program so that we would be able to potentially give you some assistance. But I'm not aware of any right now for which you would be eligible.
Andrew in New Orleans. Hello, Andrew. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you very much for calling in.
I have a question that I'd like your opinion on, and it kind of is twofold and has to do with the legalization of recreational marijuana, both in what your opinion on it has the effect on the justice system and alleviating a lot of our prison population who are in jail for nonviolent crimes related to marijuana.
Well, Andrew, as I've stated, I think I've gotten a call on legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana every single program, and this is program number what?
32.
32.
Yeah.
But I do thank you for the call, and there are no shortage of folks around the state who ask about this when I travel. It's just not something that I favor, and quite frankly, I believe that if we ever do that in Louisiana, it should only be after we see what happens in other states that have taken this step, see what the benefits are, see what the costs are, and the problems that are created by it. I'm just not in favor of legalizing marijuana. Now, as you know, through the criminal justice reform efforts that we've undertaken in Louisiana, I'm certainly trying to make sure that individuals are not unnecessarily sent to prison because of low-level drug offenses and so forth. And we did have simple drug possession was actually the leading crime that drove the incarceration rate in Louisiana. And we have made some changes in that regard. And I think you do know, Andrew, that I support medicinal marijuana, which I believe will come online and actually be available here in Louisiana at some point in 2019 with a doctor's prescription. I just can't go there on the legalization for recreational purposes.
Your number is 877-217-5757. Still time to get in with Governor John Bel Edwards. Let's go to Covington. John is on the line. Hello, John. You're on the air.
Hello, Governor. Thank you very much for providing this access directly to you.
Oh, thank you, John. And it's always a pleasure for me to do it. And I appreciate the fact that so many people listen.
My question's about the Coastal Zone Management program that you're directing.
Yes, sir.
I have the idea that if that program were more inclusive to allow the private sector better ways to invest in, let's say, storm surge structures in the Gulf in the coastal zone, that we might be able to leverage our coastal zone protection and restoration money with the private sector. I know the private sector has probably got a lot of very innovative ideas about what could be done, but as long as we maintain it as a solely government program, they don't get that chance. We don't get to harness the power of the private sector.
Well, John, I will tell you, I share some of your concern, which is why a couple of years ago we made a successful move to allow Pay for Success to get projects installed at risk of the private sector. And then once the project is built and is built to standard, then the state would actually pay. And this is a way to deliver projects faster, to not pay for things that ultimately are unsuccessful, and it allows us to move forward by having the private sector more involved in the design and construction, but also putting their capital at risk until such time as a successful project is built. So we did change the law to allow that in the coastal program. And we are moving forward with that model too, and that's one of the things that we're doing that I think is responsive to your concerns. And I will tell you, coastal restoration, coastal protection, it remains a critical priority for us because we're in a race against time, as you know. The trifecta is hitting us. We've got sea level rise, we've got subsidence, and we've got coastal erosion all at one time. So we're doing more. And I appreciate your call.
And before we return to the phone lines, you in the past few days have called for a teacher pay hike, something you have advocated before, and a listener asked about charter schools, how this would affect teachers who are employed there.
Yeah, and we got this question by Twitter, so I appreciate the listener registering the question through Twitter. And the question is whether teachers at charter schools will participate in the pay raise, and the answer is yes. Those are public schools, and they will participate in the pay raise just like other teachers. And this is actually a priority that I announced going back into the summer. It's the number one priority for next year. And the reason is, 10 years ago, teachers in Louisiana were paid at the Southern average. Today, it's about $2,200 below the Southern average, and that's because there's only been a couple of MFP increases over the last 10 years as we've had all these budget constraints. But now that we have an improving economy, a growing economy, and we have the budget stability that we've needed, notwithstanding the $600 million tax cut that we gave from last year to this year, we will be able to give $1,000 pay raise per teacher. And when I say teacher, that includes all certificated personnel. So it could be a nurse, could be a counselor. $1,000 there, $500 per support worker. And I'm talking to members of the House and the Senate, Republicans, Democrats, independents alike, and there's widespread support for this. And then the other thing that I'm optimistic about is the economy is going to continue to grow, and we're going to have the funding that we need in order to make this a reality. But teachers at charter schools will participate.
Robin in Lake Charles. Robin, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Yes, sir. Good to speak with you. And my question is about the Medicaid expansion, which I greatly appreciate that you have.
Yes, ma'am.
My issue is that it is very, very hard to find a doctor who will take a new Medicaid patient. I have two children who are on Medicaid right now who are both adults and working very hard. And they need doctors, they want doctors, and we've called and called and called and called, and no one is willing to take a new Medicaid patient.
Robin, I appreciate your call, and I'm not sure which managed care organization you all are dealing with, and you said you got two adult children, and I guess it's possible you've got different MCOs that you're dealing with. But that's the first place to look because they're required under the contract to maintain current lists of providers who are participating in the Medicaid program. One of the challenges that we have in the Lake Charles area is just all of the growth in that market in terms of people moving in, the employment and so forth. But if you will stay on the line, give your name to Micah, we will get someone from the Department of Health to work with you and perhaps involve the MCOs that are at issue as well to work towards this, because the Medicaid expansion has been extremely helpful to our state. It's very positive, but I do understand that on occasion having provider access is an issue, and so we want to work through that, and we want not just for you, Robin, but for everybody across the state. And so if you will stay on, give your name and number to Micah, I will have someone from the Department of Health in the Medicaid program contact you, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve your problem in short order.
Thank you, Robin, and best of luck to you. Gus in Baton Rouge. Hello, Gus. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hello. Yes, good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon to you.
I am a student who attends Westdale Middle School, and I would like to know what your exact plan is for increasing teacher pay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your call, Gus. I appreciate it, and hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving break. So the plan is to increase the MFP, which we haven't done in a number of years. That is the funding formula by which we fund K through 12 education. It is constitutionally protected. We had a goal for years to increase it by 2.75% annually, just so that the support for education doesn't fall behind because of the impact of inflation. The budget constraints that we've been operating under in Louisiana for years didn't allow us to do that. We now have an opportunity to give an increase to the MFP, so I want to do that. Historically, half of that increase is used for teacher pay. But if you use half of the 2.75% increase for teacher pay, you still don't get to $1,000 per teacher or $500 per support worker. So we're going to put additional funding on top of that. This is probably a little more technical than you wanted, Gus, but it'll be in level 2 of the MFP, so that we will be able to get to the $1,000 per teacher, the $500 per support worker. And in order to allow the increase in the MFP to operate as a block grant to the school districts, we also intend to make sure that the state covers the related benefits cost for these pay raises. So otherwise the school districts would not get any additional flexibility with the increase in MFP that we're going to be giving them. So with any luck, we will be able to do this. We'll get it done next year. It is my number one priority. 35% of our students are being taught by teachers who are either not certified or they're teaching outside of the area of certification. We need to do better if we're going to actually close, I guess I should say improve performance in the education system in our great state.
David in New Iberia. Hello, David. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hello, Governor Edwards. Thank you for all your hard work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
I'd like to ask you, Jeff Landry, the Attorney General, and Blake Miguez are using KPEL as a sounding board to push their far-right candidates, like for Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin. That seems to me to be unethical or possibly illegal. Is there anything that we can do about this?
Yeah, well, David, I might disagree with Representative Miguez and the Attorney General on occasion, at least. I'm not sure of anything that they're doing through the radio station over there, through the broadcast and so forth, is unethical or illegal. I'm not aware of any allegation like that. If we disagree with them, then we have an opportunity to go out and express ourselves and try to convince people that they are wrong. But I don't know of anything that would actually be illegal.
Tom in Baton Rouge. Hello, Tom. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Governor Edwards, thank you for taking my call, and thank you for working so hard for Louisiana citizens.
Thank you, Tom.
Listen, I live over in Spanish Town, and I walk my little dog on Capitol grounds, a couple of times at least a day. And we just have so many more tourists than people can imagine that come on buses and just in individual cars that tour the Capitol. And so many of them aren't finding the way to get inside the Capitol because we still have our front doors locked and with a little fence across. and what is being done to get that return to where people can go in the front door. And before you answer, I'd just like to add that last year I made a trip up to Minnesota by automobile, and I went through Missouri and Iowa and, of course, Minnesota, and then I came back down through Wisconsin and Illinois and Tennessee. And all those state capitals, or you can just walk right in the front door as if it were, some little office building or something.
All right.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for the call. And by the way, the Capitol grounds are beautiful, and you get to experience them daily. I would encourage you to make sure you get to the old Arsenal Park, which is now our Veterans Memorial Park in Louisiana, and especially go by and see the new Gold Star Family Memorial monument that we have put there. We have the most visited state capitol in the United States of America. A lot of people don't understand it, but we do. And Tom, the issue that you're talking about is one of safety. So there's work that's taking place right now on the Capitol. And on occasion, as this work is progressing, pieces of the exterior of the Capitol actually fall. And so in order to protect people from falling material, they are not allowing individuals to use the front door. And as soon as they complete the repairs to the building, that is going to change. But it is purely a matter of safety. This has been an ongoing issue for some time. And in fact, it was an issue when we did my inauguration on the front steps of the Capitol. But that's what's happening there, Tom, and it's purely a safety issue. And I'm sorry about any inconvenience, but we do want those visitors to continue to come to Louisiana and to go to our beautiful Capitol.
And we're heading for Thanksgiving in a couple of days. Governor Edwards, before we talk about your holiday plans, you have an update on the Sunshine Bridge.
I do. So work is progressing, and it's going well. That we authorize them to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, weather permitting. And so right now we're in the middle of the heat straightening of the bent and twisted structural support, that member that was so heavily damaged, and that heat straightening should be finished this weekend, weather permitting. And so what we are anticipating we're going to be able to do is sometime around the middle of December, we hope to be able to open half of the bridge, so we will have one lane open in either direction, which should be a tremendous benefit to the motorists who want to use that bridge, need to use that bridge. We still don't believe that the bridge itself will be open before January, because we have a lot of work to continue to do on the remainder of the bridge. But that's the timeline that we're operating on.
And we've got to roll, but have a great Thanksgiving. You're headed for Mississippi.
I am. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.